security. Also, of course, the airport security was, the Democrats wanted to be national. On the ID card, I remember the administration's original position was we don't need a national ID card yet, right after 9/11, when most people wanted one. And with Obama, of course, not only would a second 9/11 kind of just ratchet everything up, but with Obama, even if he was a little better, unless he's willing to go all out challenging the fascists, which is kind of a funny thing even to say, because that's definitely not who he is. But even if that is who he is, politics pushes him to be more fascist than the Republicans have to be, just to get people on board. One example I've been thinking about lately is, do you think what do you think George W. Bush would have said about the so-called Ground Zero Mosque? Sometimes I think he would have been better defending the First Amendment and property rights and the dignity of just Muslim Americans doing their peaceful thing than Obama.
As he waged war against Muslims across the planet Earth, he always said, we're not at war with Islam.
Right, right. And I think that he believed it. That did it, more or less. That doesn't mean that his rationale was any more justifiable or less murderous, but he was always very careful, and remember the right wing was critical of him, but not as critical as they would be if Obama, really stressed this. So I think Bush would have come out and, remember when Bush wanted to have the Dubai company take over port security, of course, corporatism, cronyism. But was it a Islamist plot to overturn America, like Charles Schumer?
It reminded me of that movie Network, where he's lecturing the guy, and he goes, look, we gave the Arabs a bunch of money, and now they have to give it back, and you're messing with the laws of nature, dude. There is no such thing as Dubai, okay? It's one planet. It's ruled from New York and D.C. Get over it.
Right, and of course there was that more captures the reality than this idea that Bush was caving to the Islamo-fascists.
Right.
Which is
so now the lid is off on the right now.
Yeah, and the Democrats are not afraid to appeal to our fears of to our xenophobia. Look at deportations, just normal immigrant deportations have skyrocketed under Obama. Of course, no one talks about this. For the first time in years, people are all worried about the immigrants. But Obama is the most rigorous immigration law enforcer since, I don't know what, Carter? Because, of course, Reagan toned things down. He enforced the law, but he toned things down. And
he did the immunity and all that.
Yeah.
All right, well, so I didn't really give you a good introduction other than you're my friend. He's at the Independent Institute, writes for LouRockwell.com and the Future Freedom Foundation as well, and lots of other stuff, Strike the Root. And, man, if you go to Anthony's archives at LouRockwell.com, there's some really, really good stuff there going back years and years. The latest one is called War Worship. Anthony Gregory on collectivism and hate. America is not a normal country. The persistence of red state fascism. The crime ring called the Fed. The new Brown scare. How the left learned to stop worrying and love the FBI. It's great stuff. Always read through to the end. So, Anthony, I was out of town, but there was some big shindig where all my heroes showed up.
Well, yes, and this was great at the Hilton in Universal City. There was Libertopia. It's the first time they've had this conference. I was fortunate enough to be a speaker, and got to catch up with a lot of friends and see a lot of speakers. A lot of people were sad you weren't there, but of course we understand, but we miss you. But we had a lot of great speakers, Roderick Long and David Beto and Sheldon
Rad.
Richmond.
What was David Beto's speech about?
Voluntary communities, talking about how the government welfare used to, the history of welfare, private welfare, fraternal organizations, how, believe it or not, people are capable of taking care of each other without guns being involved. And or without threats of people being put in cages if they don't hand over their money being involved. That in fact the history in America shows that this was the main way people helped each other out. And it was a lot cheaper and easier to do so back before we had Leviathan involved in every economic transaction. When you're just free to get together, I mean, that is what freedom is, the freedom to get together and do things that are peaceful together and cooperate in any way that you want. That's magical things happen. But then when you need to, like, get permission to have too many, to have 7 people sleeping in the living room or whatever, it's a lot harder for the poorest people to really get the help they need when regulation and all the rest is away. So great stuff. And
yeah, he's a great civil rights activist and libertarian historian. And Liberty and Power is the name of the blog he keeps over there at the History News Network. I urge everybody to read it. It's great stuff.
Yeah,
and so Roderick Long, what did he talk about?
He talked about anarchy, why people should be anarchists. He addressed some objections to anarchism. I believe his was the first talk or the second talk. It was one of the first talks, and it was just like, all right, what a way to start the weekend, cut right to the chase. And I think that of all the speakers, maybe 1 or 2 was not a full-blown anarchist, but it kind of felt good to be around. I've been to libertarian events in the past where there'd be times I felt like I was the only libertarian in the room. I'm not trying to diss people for being moderate or anything. I'm a big tent guy, when it comes down to it, and when it comes to getting together, but you've been there with me, libertarian events, and then someone dares to question the story of Pearl Harbor, as most Americans think of it, and someone's horrified and leaves the room, and you're thinking, wow, I thought this was an anti-state, anti-war type group of people. What's going on here?
Yeah.
But that kind of thing never happened.
All right, so what was your speech at Libertopia?
My speech was, it had a long kind of clumsy title, but I'll just say it because it sums up the idea, is how do not be co-opted by the machine, how libertarian energy is diverted into statist ends. And so I have this theme I've been kind of harping on lately about how libertarian energy and broadly speaking classical old liberal just sentiment has often ended up pushing one side into power, pushing through certain reforms in government that leave us no better than we were before, really, and that how we often see the state itself co-opt our language, co-opt the ideas of liberty. You were talking about how a lot of people say democracy isn't just majority rule, it's majority rule with rights for the individual, or for at least some minority rights. Well, that's more good PR that the state employs. The state says, oh, we are a democracy, so now not only are the people of the state, but the state is libertarian, right? I mean, that's the myth of democracy. But you can't have it both ways. You can't have majority rules and the minority is protected from the majority's rule. It's a contradiction. It's a paradox. And
majority rule always means rule by 1/10 of 1% anyway, because they get to dictate what TV says, and that's the end of that.
Yeah, it's still an oligarchy. I mean, pretty much all forms of government are oligarchies, or I guess some are more autocratic. But you've got a small elite, and all you have to do is look at how much government employees get paid versus other people. I mean, economic liberals are especially sensitive. They say, like teachers are underpaid, for example. They always say public school teachers are underpaid. But they're paid more than the average person in society, actually. So what's that mean? I mean, even a full-blown Marxist would conclude they're overpaid because they're taking more than their share. And this is how government officials are. Now
hiring deputy sheriffs starting at $80,000 a year, man.
Yeah, Barney Fife.
That's more than I'll ever make a year in my life, I guarantee you.
Well, they are going to, not assuming they don't go Zimbabwe on us, That is a lot of money, right?
Which they just might.
Which they just might. So let's hope you don't.
It'll be like 80,000 will be my weekly pay.
Yeah. That's not necessarily better.
Yeah,
but
back in my day, a small Slurpee was just a quarter.
Yeah, you're older than I am.
Oh man, yeah, well,
just a little bit.
I lived in Texas too. California prices, man, I'll tell you.
Oh yeah.
All right, so let's talk more about the warfare state, because liberals always hear libertarians talking and think, man, you guys just want to set the corporations free. Rich white man's anarchy for you. But of course, what's the worst part of the prison industrial complex, the war industrial complex, whatever? It's the merger, that fascist public-private partnership where General Electric and the generals are the same people.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you just want to turn the whole damn thing over to General Electric now, Anthony.
Well, but you can't turn it over to General Electric. Couldn't profit from this war if it had to pay for the war. I mean, the only reason that the whole deal is the big businesses reap the rewards, the costs are socialized. We're forced to pay taxes, people are murdered, and a small elite gets rich. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. That's always what all governments are about, and that's always what they'll always be about, because that's what they are. And not all of them commit mass murder all the time, but it's just a scam. The idea that the ruling class can be something other than the state, that the state can be the underdog, that the state can stick up for the people that are least powerful by being more powerful than anyone else. It's the most absurd contradiction if you really just think about it. And of course the state uses massive brainwashing to get people to ignore this simple concept that, of course, the people who have the most access to everything else in society because of money are going to have the most access to the state. And there's no way to ever change that. Get over it. If you don't like that, you have to reduce the political power, ideally eliminate the state. There is no military-industrial complex without the state. There's businessmen, working all day and all night trying to get rich, and maybe some of them will get rich, but they can't get rich by taxing you to kill people. And as soon as you believe in the state, that's what you believe in. And as soon as you believe in that, you believe in the state. It's the same thing. So maybe I'm not being completely articulate here, but
just any kind of left, from whatever you consider any sort of left, whatever. Private power is dangerous. These evil corporations, Noam Chomsky talking, right? These top-down private tyrannies, total control over everything. And you're saying it's the state's fault, not their fault.
I'm saying that it's probably both of their faults, but the state is the main problem here, and the state, including almost any so-called leftist who ever has any power over the state, ends up cozying up to the very corporations that everyone thinks are the worst, and those almost always are the corporations that are most in bed with the state. Obamacare, the insurance industry, TARP and all of these banking regulations, the banking establishment itself, foreign policy, all of these, contractors that the left hates are the ones that brought Obama to power and that Obama is expanding their power. And this is not an accident. Liberals often ask, how do we stop this? How do we remedy this? But I think
democracy, voting, because one man, one vote, no matter how rich you are. And then that way the little guy can stick it to the big guy.
But of course the thing is, when it ever does happen that the poor, the masses of disenfranchised people overtake the regime and really take it over and kick out the old elite, they're just as bad, or they're worse, because they've, look at communism. That's what that is. And people say, well, we never really got it. Well, they sure tried like a couple dozen times. Sometimes it was just a terrible, horrible catastrophe of suffering.